This podcast may contain explicit language. Welcome to the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast, the show that uses a unique grading style to redefine what the greatest movies are. I'm Tom Duncan.
And I'm Dana Duncan.
We also welcome back our returning celebrity guest. He is the host and creator of the Best Picture cast. You know him from his previous appearances on Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, Lost in Translation, Gran Torino, Stalag 17, Shane, A Fistful of Dollars, and our revisits of The Best Years of Our Lives and 12 Angry Men. Please welcome back Kieran B.
Yes, and if I don't need help with the math, I believe that makes me a nine-time guest.
7, 8. Yeah, this is number 9.
It's a big number. That's a big number. I feel good about it. And, you know, over at Best Picture Cast, we're doing we probably will have done by now a live episode for our 100th episode. So I'm trying to get good at the numbers here and the math of these episodes. So. I'm happy to be back. I love the show. I know you guys have really gotten in the rhythm of having guests on this thing. And I'm a guest from way back when guesting on Gmote was a special, cool thing here. So not that it's not cool now, but we
know how you really feel.
And I'll tell you what, I'm a fan first and a guest second. I'm a listener of the show. And I'm here to contribute as such. So I listen to it every week. I'm happy to contribute and be a part of the thing. I'm honored to be here with you, Tom, and Dana.
Well, thank you very much for that. And thank you, of course, for the listens. But, I mean, you are also our second highest numerical guest to this point, and will be only the second person to pass the barrier of the 10 episodes on, which means when you come back for Saw, that'll be your T-shirt episode.
Wow. And this is incredible. And I believe then I will also have been on as many Gmote episodes as there are Saw movies. So we'll be doing 10 at the same time here. This is exciting stuff here. But
we are not covering all 10 Saw movies, just one.
I would hope not. I'm happy you're covering one, and I'm going to take that and run to the bank with that. And it should probably be the only one you ever cover. And hey, we're doing it for Halloween. So
yeah. I mean, we could have covered like Halloween or something else, but for whatever reason, I'm covering Saw.
I love it. And also, I should just mention too, is you guys are getting me in the middle of a move here, so if you can see the backdrop here is a little chaotic, and but I wouldn't miss a Gmote episode scheduled here. I'm committed. I'm a man of a commitment and a man of my word. So happy to be here and do this.
I thought those were just nice little fluffy clouds.
It's my Bob Ross wall. I just kind of put a little cloud over here.
Happy trees, little birds here and there.
Sprinkle them in. Tell anyone. It'll be our little secret.
Well, let's get to the meat of the episode this evening. It is your favorite film. Tonight, for our 228th episode, we revisit the 1994 classic, The Shawshank Redemption, written and directed by Frank Darabont. Music by Thomas Newman. Cinematography by Roger Deakins. Starring Tim Robbins as Andy Dufresne. Morgan Freeman as Ellis Boyd Red Redding. Bob Gunton as Samuel Norton. William Sadler as Haywood. Clancy Brown as Byron Hadley. Gil Bellows as Tommy Williams. James Whitmore as Brooks Hatlin. Mark Ralston as Boggs Diamond. And Jeffrey DeMunn as the prosecuting attorney in the Dufresne trial. Kind of a mouthful there for a character name. Recognition for this movie. The Shawshank Redemption was released on September 23rd, 1994, making next week, after this comes out, the 30th anniversary. On a budget of $25 million, the film only grossed $16 million in its initial run in the U.S. However, when the film was nominated for Best Picture, Actor for Morgan Freeman, Adapted Screenplay for Frank Darabont, Cinematography for Roger Deakins, Film Editing, Sound, and Score for Thomas Newman, It was re-released, receiving an additional $12 million in the US, and would finish internationally with $73.3 million overall. Despite its disappointing box office returns, in what was then considered a risky move, Warner Home Video shipped 320,000 rental video copies throughout the United States in 1995. It went on to become one of the top rented films of the year. It was the 7th top video rental of 1995 in the United States. Ted Turner's Turner Broadcasting System had acquired Castle Rock in 1993, which enabled his television channel TNT to obtain the cable broadcast rights to the film. Because of the low box office numbers, TNT could air the film at a very low cost, but still charge premium advertising rates. The film began airing regularly on the network in June 1997. Television airings of the film accrued record-breaking numbers, and its repeated broadcast was considered essential to turning the film into a cultural phenomenon after its poor box office performance. By 2013, The Shawshank Redemption had aired on 15 basic cable networks, and in that year occupied 151 hours of airtime, rivaling only Scarface and behind Mrs. Doubtfire. It was in the top 15% of movies among adults between the ages of 18 and 49 on the Spike, Up, Sundance TV, and Lifetime channels. And despite its mainly male cast, it was the most watched movie on the female-targeted OWN network. While finances for licensing the film for television are unknown, in 2014, current and former Warner Brothers executives confirmed that it was one of the highest valued assets in the studio's $1.5 billion library. That same year, Gunton said that by its 10th anniversary in 2004, he was still earning six-figure residual payments and was still earning a substantial income just from this film, which was considered unusual so many years after its release. The film has been nominated for or appeared on the American Film Institute's list celebrating the top 100 film or film-related topics several times. In 1998, it was nominated for AFI's 100 Years, 100 Movies list and was number 72 on the 2007 revised list, outranking both Forrest Gump at 76 and Pulp Fiction at 94. It was also number 23 on AFI's 100 Years, 100 Cheers in 2006, charting inspiring films. The characters of Andy and Warden Norton received nominations for AFI's 100 Years, 100 Heroes and Villains list, AFI's 100 Years, 100 Movies quotes list for Get Busy Livin' or Get Busy Dying. Surprised that didn't actually make the top 100. AFI's 100 Years, 100 Songs list for Solaria Che Soave Zeffreddo. Yeah, like I'm going to pronounce that correctly. From The Marriage of Figaro. And AFI's 100 Years of Film Scores for Newman's work. In 2005, the Writers Guild of America listed Darabont's screenplay at number 22 on its list of the 100 greatest screenplays, and in 2006, Film 4 listed it number 13 on its list of the 50 films to see before you die. In 2014, The Shawshank Redemption was named Hollywood's fourth favorite film based on a survey of 2,000 Hollywood-based entertainment industry members. Entertainment lawyers skewed the most towards the film. In 2017, the Daily Telegraph named it the 17th best prison film ever made. What 16 ones are better? And USA Today listed it as one of the top 50 best films of all time. In 2019, Games Radar Plus listed its ending as one of the best of all time. It has been the number one film on IMDb's user-generated Top 250 since 2008, the famous IMDb Top 250. When it surpassed The Godfather, having remained at or near the top since the late 1990s. In the United Kingdom, readers of Empire voted the film as the best of the 1990s, the greatest film of all time in 2006, and it placed number 4 on Empire's 2008 list of the 500 greatest movies of all time, and their 2017 list of the 100 greatest movies. In March 2011, the film was voted by BBC Radio 1 and BBC One Extra listeners as their favorite film of all time. It regularly appears on Empire's Top 100 Films, was named the greatest film to not win the Academy Award for Best Picture in a 2013 poll by Sky UK, it lost to Forrest Gump, and ranked as Britain's favorite film in a 2015 YouGov poll. When the British Film Institute analyzed the demographic breakdown of the YouGov poll, it noted that The Shawshank Redemption was not the top-ranked film in any group, but was the only film to appear in the top 15 of every age group, suggesting it is able to connect with every polled age group. Unlike Pulp Fiction, which fared better with younger voters, and Gone with the Wind with older voters. In 2015, the film was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry. Shawshank Redemption currently holds an 89% among critics on Rotten Tomatoes, an 82 score on Metacritic, and a 4.6 out of 5 on Letterboxd. So as we begin each week, and as we did with our original episode, Dad, what is your relationship to this film?
I saw the previews for it, and I saw that it was available, and I believe it was the weekend it came out. It was released in Reedsburg, Wisconsin, and I took your mother on a date, and we went down to Reedsburg from where we were living in Mauston to see it in the theater. The road between Mauston and Reedsburg is in the middle of nowhere, and I think we had something like 50 deer that were along the side of the road between Mauston and Reedsburg. So we were late getting there. So I did not see the opening scene, the trial scene, or the murder and the trial scene. The first portion of the film I ever saw was the arrival on the bus. And I had never seen that scene until we watched it for the show the first time we did the episode. Otherwise, I'd always seen it. I picked it up in the middle someplace on cable.
To be honest, you could probably skip the opening scene and do just fine.
And yeah, it didn't make any difference to me until I just had never seen it.
It's probably about 5 minutes of the movie that you can just cut out and no one cares.
Probably.
So, like many people, I have no fucking clue the first time I saw this movie. None. I have seen it so many times, caught it on cable so many different times that it's really hard to pinpoint at all my relationship with this movie. It's just like it's always been there.
A sign of a great classic there. You know, those are the best ones, the ones that you can't even remember. They've always been such a part of your life that you can't even remember the first time you saw it. So for me, as you mentioned there, Tom, this is my number one movie of all time. I know this has kind of become a challenging question on the greatest movie of all time podcast for newcomers here, where they have to pick it. But on my very first Gmode episode, it was a very easy question to answer. This is my number one with a bullet. It is my favorite movie of all time. I saw it for the first time, believe it or not, in this very room I'm sitting in. This was I moved back into my parents' house with my girlfriend here, so it's a little bit of nostalgia here, recording this in the room that I watched it, and I saw it just as it was intended to be seen on TNT. I was flicking through, and it just, much like Dana, missed that opening scene. It just kind of, they're all getting there, and I'm like, oh, Shawshank Redemption. This was that movie that was up the Gump fiction year. This is the one with the weird name, and watching it, and then sure enough, you sit down, and then the commercial comes, and it's like, well, I'm not going to do anything else. I got to see what happens here next. And the movie just literally, I sat there and watched the entire thing through commercials, probably about 4 hours of my day. But it was, it just completely sucked me in. And I couldn't tell you how many times I've seen it since. But most recently, this viewing, it was playing at a local theater, coincidentally and conveniently enough, or inconvenient for some, as they would say. It was playing in the theater, so I saw it on the big screen on Saturday night with my girlfriend, who was, we watched it together for the first time in May, and this was her second viewing, so her first rewatch of it, and my first time seeing it on the big screen, and boy, it was an experience. Just, I mean, I'm sure, like your favorite movie, Tom, and your favorite movie, Dana, there's always a feeling of warmth when you revisit it, and you find little tiny things that maybe you haven't seen before, and things that you've seen a million times that you appreciate a little more each viewing. So it was just a wonderful experience, and I'm super excited to come here and talk about this one with you guys and litigate some of these scores, because I did listen to the original episode for the second time.
You did.
Yes, of course, yes. Got to do my homework, and I do think you guys did the movie justice in your discussion quite a bit. I thought it was a good episode, and we'll talk scores soon. But I appreciated listening to that one today too.
Yeah, I mean, it's ranked highly for us. I don't think we did it necessarily a disservice. It'll be curious to see how it moves, if at all, in our actual evaluation of it. it might be very difficult to move one way or the other very far. I don't think it's going to move very far down at all. I would be very hard pressed to think, especially with a super fan of the film on, that we're going to move it down. So, and there's not a lot of room to move up either. So it may be difficult to move at all. But that being said, I hadn't watched this probably since we last discussed it. So almost 3 years ago, I think. It was like November of 2021. Boy, was that a different world. But it's like riding a bicycle. You fall right back into it. It doesn't matter where you pick it up. I didn't remember the exact progression, the linear progression of the entire film, but you're like, oh yeah, I remember that scene, and I remember that scene, and oh, that other scene's got to be coming up. Oh no, I guess this other scene was before that one. And I still cried 3 times during the course of the film. So, I mean, take from that what you will.
I had tears rolling down my cheeks this time too, and I'm sure I will next time as well. It's never misses in that department for me. I did want to throw out there too, just because I was cracking up laughing today listening to the episode. The poetic justice of the movie falling in between Pulp Fiction and Jurassic Park, the 2 movies that were in the theater the day it debuted that crushed it in the box office, was just, the serendipity was incredible. I loved that. I loved that so much. So
I was running around telling everybody how great this film was after we saw it, and people were like, "What? What movie?" Okay.
Well, Dad, along those same lines, what is The Shawshank Redemption about?
Friendship and the power of friendship, and how friendship can overcome so many obstacles. It's also, to some extent, about hope.
You know, I absolutely agree with that. One of the things that I've kind of been in on these past few years when we covered it on Best Picture Cast, you know, when I speak in deeper themes with people about it, one of my main focuses here with this film, or one of my main theses for this film, is that it's an allegory for overcoming depression or hardship within your life. And depression in the truest sense of the definition, whatever is holding you down, holding you back, keeping you from accomplishing what you need to do. And I think the one line in the movie, and it really spoke to me this time. I mean, to me, the best scene of the movie is the 2 of them at the wall. The get busy living, get busy dying, and all that. But Andy says, in response to Red confronting him with it, Mexico's way down there, and I'm way up here. And I guess that's just how it is. And maybe you got to get busy living, get busy dying. Paraphrased a little bit. And when you're in that sort of funk in your life, I'm here, happiness is way out there, and you're either imprisoned by it or you're finding a way to escape it. And I think this movie really digs to the core of that. So for me, it's always kind of been an allegory of that.
So I think if you ask the average filmgoer, if the film's about redemption, who's redeemed, most people are going to say Andy. I'm going to take the contrarian view that it's everybody else in the prison that's redeemed, except for Warden Gunton.
Well, depends.
He gets his just desserts.
Yeah, him and old Byron Hadley.
Cracking skulls.
Yeah.
So for a period drama set in a men's prison, why has this movie become so universal since its original release?
You just watched it. I mean, it's a joyful journey. It's not always a joyful movie. The first hour of this movie is real heavy and real almost dark. You have to really go on this voyage with him to get to the end, and you earn it. You earn it at the end. And man, that final scene is just it's one of the greatest power-ups in cinema history. So I think it's been considered, even though it's, as you suggested, a bit of a sausage fest. It's kind of it's such a human movie and such a triumph by these characters. So it's no surprise to me that it's lasted all these years and is still able to connect to new viewers today.
If I'll suggest a couple of alternative things why I think this film is so appealing is it does something in accomplishing kind of its structure similar to how Raiders is structured. So Raiders of the Lost Ark is famously in like 10-minute chunks where everything ends with some type of action sequence. Indy's chasing this, he's chasing that. He's falling off of a truck. He's in a boxing match with a guy near a plane, et cetera, et cetera. And they built the entire movie around there will be an action scene every 10 minutes. This is not quite on that same level of structure where it's so cleanly that, we're going to time it based on the editing of every 10 minutes. But the movie is made up of vignettes. It's little short stories within the larger theme of things that, okay, Andy's getting nearly thrown off the roof and then he's getting beers for the other guys. And then Andy's getting new materials for the library and he plays the record over the loudspeaker and he gets himself in solitary confinement. And every one of these has a small little blurb within the course of the film, which is why it works so well on cable. If you divide it up based on where the story timeline's on, it's like chapters in a book. If you take the Brooks section, that by itself is one thing, and you can end it with a commercial. And you come back from the commercial, and now we're into some shenanigans with somebody else, et cetera, et cetera. And you can keep it rolling that way. So it keeps people invested because you have kind of this small little story within itself that has a beginning, middle, and an end. And then we move on to the next thing. And it doesn't feel like the movie drags in that sense. So you have the ability to have these characters over time build with you, but not necessarily lose interest. So that, to me, is also part of it. If we're talking about universal themes, there's a lot. I know I'm not the first person to say as much, but there is a lot of Judeo-Christian imagery and likeness to Andy's struggle with that of Christ. So it feels very familiar in the redemption angle and arc. It ends on a redemptive note, which is always a favorite of people. So it's going to have that extra draw to it. I just think it's set up to be kind of almost by accident an appealing movie. And then you have it over, the larger themes of struggle, overcoming things, hope, friendship. I think that those are all appealing as well.
There was one thing about this film when I watched it again that it didn't dawn on me. But for the most part, they got by getting by keeping their head down and going with the flow and not making waves. And Andy took a chance when he's on the roof approaching Hadley about his tax problem. And that's the point where the entire film changes, where he goes from having this very dark existence to having, he's in some level of control because the guards are all protecting him. He's not being attacked anymore, and everything changes. And so part of this film is sometimes you set about, or some risk you take in your life ultimately changes the course or direction.
So, Dad, this is the third film from this particular year. It's a very famous year for its Best Picture race. We have covered all three now, both last week with Pulp Fiction and this one in revisits, but we covered Forrest Gump earlier this year. Is this the best film of 1994?
It's going to be very subjective as far as your taste. But realistically, while I love Gump and I have an appreciation for Pulp Fiction, I would say yes.
I think this is the best film of 1994. I think Pulp Fiction is the most influential, and I think Gump was the rightful winner at the time.
Tom, you took the words literally right out of my mouth. I was going to say that just about verbatim. Listen, it's my favorite movie of all time. I think it is the best film of the three. I think that Pulp is the most important, and there was no scenario where Gump wasn't winning that year. So we can cross our tea leaves or check our cosmic stars and reevaluate and revise everything we want. Gump was winning that year. It was the biggest movie of the year. It was It was important at the time, and it is a really good movie too. So I think you summed it up perfectly there.
Yeah, I think they all have merit. I think Gump has been dumped on a little bit too much, given the nature of it's going against two titans that it somehow beat. But that doesn't mean it's any less of a good film. I still think it's a good film. It's got some issues in hindsight that, we can litigate here or there. It's still a decently emotional film, a connecting film. I don't think it's quite on this level, but that doesn't discount that the film itself was, the heartbeat of America for like 2 years.
Yeah, there's a category that we'll get to later that starts with a C and ends with a Lassic. And I think that this movie embodies that, where the other two, Gump was very of its 90s vibe, and I said, I appreciate Gump quite a bit. And not that Pulp isn't very 90s too, it is.
Yeah.
But there's it is still a niche film for a certain type of viewer, whereas I think that Shawshank as a film can hang with the titans of the classic genre. We'll put it that way.
So, Dad, are we ready to give some more background on the movie? Do you have our plot summary ready for us?
Yes. In the somber corridors of Shawshank Prison, where hope is a rare commodity and despair is a constant companion, Andy Dufresne, Tim Robbins, a quiet and introspective banker, finds himself wrongfully convicted for the brutal murder of his wife and her lover. Sentenced to life in the unforgiving confines of Shawshank, he is thrust into a world where the human spirit is tested daily. Andy's journey is one of quiet resilience and unyielding hope. He befriends Ellis Red Redding, Morgan Freeman, a seasoned inmate known for his ability to procure contraband. Through Red's eyes, we witness Andy's transformation from a man broken by circumstances to a beacon of hope for his fellow prisoners. Andy's ingenuity and determination lead him to uncover the corrupt practices of the prison warden, using his financial acumen to expose the rot within Shawshank's walls. In the end, Andy's journey is not just a tale of escape, but a testament to the enduring power of hope and friendship. His story delves into the depths of human suffering and emerges with a profound sense of resilience and triumph.
Thank you. By the way, can you say Andy Dufresne again for me?
Andy Dufresne.
Why do you always go into like some weird Savannah accent to say Andy Dufresne? He's from Maine.
It's a little bit of Morgan.
Okay. Did you know? Andy and Red's opening chat in the prison yard, in which Red is throwing a baseball, took 9 hours to shoot. Morgan Freeman threw the baseball for an entire 9 hours without a word of complaint. Next day, he showed up for work with his left arm in a sling. Did you know? Stephen King never cashed his $5,000 check for rights to the film. Several years after the movie came out, King got the check framed and mailed it back to Frank Darabont with a note inscribed, "In case you ever need bail money, love, Steve." Did you know? When Andy goes to the library to begin work as Brooks's assistant, Tim Robbins had to time his line, "Hey Jake, where's Brooks?" so that the crow wouldn't squawk over him, since the bird could not be trained to squawk on cue. Robbins was able to time his line perfectly by learning the bird's squawking patterns, from which writer and director Frank Darabont praised him. Did you know? Frank Darabont watched Goodfellas every Sunday while shooting this film, and drew inspiration from it on using voiceover narration and showing the passage of time. Did you know? The mugshots of a young-looking Red that are attached to his parole papers are actually pictures of Morgan Freeman's younger son, Alfonso Freeman. Alfonso also had a cameo in the movie as a con shouting, fresh fish today, we're reeling them in." A year after The Shawshank Redemption, he appeared as a fingerprint technician in another Morgan Freeman movie, Seven. And with that, we will take our first break, and we will be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, next week for our 229th episode, we welcome back Christine Duncan, our most frequent guest, and new guest Mike Imal of Cinemas, to discuss the classic legal drama Anatomy of a Murder from 1959, directed by Otto Preminger, written by Wendell Mays, music by Duke Ellington, starring James Stewart, Lee Remick, Ben Gazzara, and George C. Scott. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you.
That's REELGOOD.
Now, before we jump back into the rest of the show, Kieran, what is going on at the BPC?
Best Picture Cast is where we got lots going on over here, man. Let me tell you, we have our, as mentioned earlier, our first ever live show in Huntington, the Cinema Arts Center on Long Island. Exciting stuff. We're going to be watching Jurassic Park and podcasting immediately afterwards. The room fits 100. We're hoping we get 100. We'll see how it goes, but it's an exciting times over here. In addition to that, we're running our sub 50 movie tournament. So all movies under 50% on Rotten Tomatoes. We're in the heat of that now. Probably should be coming to a conclusion by the time this airs, and we'll have to do a full episode on one of those movies. And in addition to that, we just completed our 5th season over here. So each season's 15 Best Picture winners. So we are at 75 Best Picture winning films covered. Ordinary People will have dropped this past week. And that caps off 75 Best Picture winners. So we're getting close to the end of our list here. So exciting times here at Best Picture Cast.
How do you determine the voting bracket? Like, who goes up against what?
It is it's World Cup style. So you have your pools and 2 advance from each pool until you get into the head-to-head rounds. But it's random draw in the first round. It's you pull them out of a hat, and you could have your bracket of death. You could have some really bad brackets where people just don't even know what to vote for, especially with the sub 50 tournament.
Yeah, that's definitely true. There were a couple of them where I'm like, God dang it. I like 2 of them from here. I love Van Wilder and I love Goldmember, but I can't vote for them both. And yet there's other ones where I'm like, why the fuck am I voting for any of these?
Yeah, it's funny with the sub 50. There's just some pools that just don't get a lot of we probably average somewhere between 160 and 200 votes, but there's somewhere it's barely getting to 100 because people are just like, I'm not picking any of these movies. This is ridiculous. So the horror tournament will be October, so that one gets a little spicier. But this year we are doing sub 50 horror movies, so that's going to get real bad. So good luck to everyone out there voting. Yeah,
I figure a few Saw entries will be on there.
Most of the Saw movies are eligible for that, yes. I think the one we're covering, the original Saw, is not. But yeah, I don't know. But you can check that out on Twitter X, and that's at Best Picture Cast. So throughout the month of October, you can bet on those, or you can vote on those bad horror movies.
And we will have all of your details and the links included in both the episode description as well as on the website as well for anybody that wants to check you out there. I will say I'm going to take a personal victory lap that Hail Caesar beat out Man on Fire. Take that, Andrew Corns.
Wow. Well, Corns is a big Coen Brothers guy, though, no?
I don't remember. He might be.
I think he's a big...
I don't think he hates them, but I don't know if he's as obsessive as, say, Ryan Gosling.
True.
He has an unnatural affinity for Ryan Gosling. It's bordering on obsession. Anyway.
Yeah.
He's a good-looking man, that Ryan Gosling. What can you say?
That is true. I mean, there are worse people to be obsessed over. But, all right. We are heading into our famous, world-famous, Ask Dana Anything. Unfortunately, we don't have any submissions this week. So, we may have to...
Can I ask Dana a question?
You most certainly can ask Dana a question.
How is, and I did this on one of my first episodes before there was video, how is Wisconsin football looking this year? How are the Badgers? Are they number one? Are they going to be number one?
They won't even be number one necessarily in Wisconsin.
Oh, ouch.
Well, okay, hold on. There's no other football team in Wisconsin.
Well, you always have UW Whitewater. for Division III.
Well, yeah, but they're not beating the UW football team.
Oh, I don't know. Let them play and let's see.
I mean, I'm not quite that hard on them, but yeah, UW's going to get their clock cleaned by Alabama this weekend.
Oh my! Are they playing down? They playing down?
No, Alabama's coming up to Camp Randall.
Okay.
Yep.
So this is going to be a madhouse come Saturday here. So I might need to get out of town sooner rather than later. But
wow,
yeah. They've got. So I want to say we're hosting Alabama and Oregon this year, but next week after the Alabama game, we have to go out to LA to the Coliseum to play USC, and USC looked damn good against LSU. Now that may be not saying much because I have no idea how good or not LSU looks. Frankly, we beat we didn't win. We should have beaten a backup squad for LSU last year, but that didn't quite happen.
And for the time-traveling listener, what is Wisconsin's current record?
2-0.
They're 2-0. Okay, so they are undefeated. So they could still be number one.
You don't need to be number one right now. You just need to be in the top 12, essentially.
Yes.
They make too many mistakes. Their offense is disjointed. Their defense cannot make plays to get off the field. And I think their talent comes in through the portal and leaves by the portal as fast as it gets there. I don't see that we have that much more talent than when Paul Christ was there, and that was one of the reasons why Christ was fired.
I'll be rooting for them. Go Badgers. Going to take out the Tide.
But other than that, Dad, how do you really feel? Yeah, I think after the Western Michigan game where we kind of like had to put them away in the fourth quarter kind of thing, and it was within one score the entire game kind of thing. And then you watch Ohio State go out and clean their clock like 56-0, and you're like, oh, well, we're not very good.
But I think that's the state of college football. I think you're going to see a lot of schools that are ranked in the top 15 who are going to get knocked off by who? Yeah, every Saturday.
Well, not to belabor the point, but I think we've lost about all of our audience now.
Yeah. Okay.
They're crawling through the shit-smelling foulness of deep cut college football talk right now. So they'll get out on the other side.
I'll be honest, the crossover between major college sports and movie nerds is not like high. the overlapping circle, very tiny.
Well,
yeah.
But anyway, I digress. All right. Well, thank you for your question, Kieran. And if you would like to submit any questions to Dana before I basically cancel this segment, since we don't seem to have much for anybody else to ask anymore, you can submit anything at greatestoldtimemoviepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on any of our socials at GMOAT Podcast, GMOAT Podcast, on Instagram, TikTok, Letterboxd, YouTube. Oh, and there's something more that I'm forgetting. Twitter. There you go.
Yes.
That other one. Or you can find us on our website, RonnieDuncanStudios.com/GMOAT Podcast. All right, let's get into the heart of the episode. Now, if you have not been with us before for any of our revisit episodes, we do not go through all of the normal steps that we would for any of our original episodes, where we will cover best scenes, best performances, things of that nature, which is our normal second segment. If you want that, you can go to our original episode, which I believe was number 89 back in November of 2021. We are currently on 228 for this episode, so quite a big gap between the two episodes. But what we're really here to do is revisit our scoring on the Stanley Rubric. So Legacy is up first, and this is a category that is usually measuring the legacy of the movie, both from an industry and audience perspective, post the 5 years after it was made, so roughly from 1999 forward. What is the legacy of this movie? Both sets are out of 5, adding up to a total of 10 for this category. So on the original episode, we judged this as a 9. So I pose to you, Dad, did we get this right or wrong?
We got it wrong. when you look at the number of people, and I did the informal poll in my office, I think we had 20 people there yesterday, or no, it was actually today. And I asked, all 20 people had seen the film. And probably 8 of them had seen it again within the last year. It has, for the public, a perfect 5. Now, when you add in all of the lists that it's on and how highly regarded it is, I think for the industry, it's risen highly from where it started. So I'm giving the industry a 5 also, because I think it's a 10.
Well, I have a feeling that our guest is not going to disagree with you. So I will make the case for the slight derivative that I have from you. I think that the industry, I have no argument against the public. I think for the public, because of how widely seen, how much it's been a part of culture for the last 30 years, it's an assumed 5. Where I take a slight jab at it is for all the movie nerds and movie podcasts that get on the IMDb top 250 and say that that's not a real list. Yes, I am poking at you specifically. But anyway, no, part of this is that I don't think it's held in as high esteem because its influence, I don't know if I see it unless it's like really a financial numbers portion of things, like a cable TV, a rentals thing, but that's a bygone business where we've kind of turned the page from what that was and what it accomplished in its time. So as far as that goes, like it's high on some lists, like it's very high on fan lists, things that are voted on by the audience. But if you ask industry professionals, I don't think this is going to take the same place as some of the other like great classics quite for them. So it's not on par with like The Godfather or Jaws or some of these other ones that we hold in such high esteem for changing cinema. It's just not quite that high. I think it's very high for the public. I don't think it's quite as high for the industry. I don't think it's like low, but I don't think it's quite on that same number. So I would have it somewhere between either a 4 or a 4.5 for either a 9 or a 9.5.
So let me see if I can sway you on this one, Tom. Because on the original episode, you guys were in unison pretty much as 5 for audience, no doubt, and 4, and you both agreed on 4 for the industry. Now, where I would look at the industry as the legacy that's had, I'm surprised no one brought up the fact that it was on both AFI lists. And the AFI lists, that's the directors, that's the filmmakers, and it made both lists. And now, I think if they were to redo the list today, it would look very different. But I do believe that this would be on there today. And only 100 movies make that. And this is chosen by the directors. Now, as far as influence and what it has done from there, I have to look at the 2 lead actors. I mean, Morgan Freeman is known for voiceover. It's like his thing. People always say, like, if I could have my life voiceover, it would be Morgan Freeman. Or let's just record him saying every word so we can always have him in the future do voiceover. I mean, what he's done, like Planet Earth, or I don't know if it's Planet. He's done those types of things, commercials and all that. And this was the first time he had ever voiceovered anything. Tim Robbins, this made him a celebrity, and both of them would win Oscars after this. You know, Tim Robbins would appear in like comedic cameos, like in Austin Powers and in Anchorman. You'd see him in War of the Worlds, not in a comedic role at all. But like, I don't know that he has that kind of recognizable face, if not for this movie. I don't know if either of them really get cast in those type of Eastwood roles with $1 Million Baby and Mystic River. I think this movie is a massive listen. That's not even bringing up what it did for cable TV and all that. I think the industry responds like enormously to this film. And of all the films that were on both AFI lists and have a good chance to be on a future one, how could they not be looked at as a 5 there for industry? So that would be my argument for that.
So as far as I know, just to correct a couple of points. One, for the 1998 list, it was only nominated. It was not on the list. I think it's because it was too recent for it to really break into that list.
So it was on the second one.
I'll discount that slightly. That's like its non-inclusion was a strike against it. But the other thing is, I don't really know who selects the AFI list. It's not said to be directors or I think it's AFI members, and
it's
that could
the American
mean,
Film Institute. Yeah.
Well, that can mean a lot of different things. The curators of the AFI, I mean, that is a nonprofit organization specifically that I think gets some level of government grant money to remain open, but also relies on donations.
Would that not be
that
industry,
too
though?
loud, or Congress will be looking into it?
Well, no, I think it's part of the preservation of American film. I mean, it's the same as the BFI. Unless you're basically saying that Republicans should start looking into it because they hate any type of public funding of the arts.
And Hollywood.
Well, that's true. So, regardless, but, I mean...
You had all the BBC stuff, too. This was also...
Right.
Internationally welcomed very well, too, yeah.
Yes, I mean, but again, I think that highlights more of the audience. I think most of the British film lists that I read off had to do with, like, fan votes. This isn't a film that's really appearing highly on like the Sight and Sound poll. And criticisms aside, which we've often criticized the Sight and Sound poll.
Yeah, the Sight and Sound poll is not. I mean, and that's also.
But as good as this film is, I still think it's much more of a creation of the fervor of the fan response to it than it ever will be the audience or the industry at large. Like, they recognize it. I don't think they're unrecognizing of it, but is it to the degree of a full 10 like The Godfather? No, it's not quite on that level. So I'm willing to go down to the 9.5, but just as like a slight nitpick on this as opposed to some other things.
I mean, how do we feel about a 9.75 here? Being that two of us have it at a 10.
Okay.
Good.
All right, locking that in. So we made a slight adjustment there. 9 to a 9.75. All right, impact and significance. So take back the original 5 years that we just discounted, throw those back into contention. It is now 1994 to 1999, and we are doing basically the same thing as Legacy, except it's within the first 5 years. What were the ripple effects from this movie? How did it change industry tactics? How did it change the lives of its stars, for example, which we kind of highlighted a little bit in the last category. But we divide this category again between the industry and the audience, 5 and 5 for a full 10 points. Instead, did we get the original impact and significance score of 7.83 right or wrong?
I think we got it wrong. I think it was too low again. I started looking at the rentals and the second release numbers. I think the public just really within that 5 years grasped this film. I think when we were looking at it before, we kind of limited it more to the original year or 18 months.
So remembering that conversation specifically, this was the first time that you really brought in that the original release window is not the full 5 years, and it does not the full 5 years make. You made the point, if I remember correctly, because I didn't quite get to that on a re-listen today. But I believe you made the point that the video rentals could be incorporated. It was the first time that you'd made that attempt as part of the larger argument of whether something was impactful or significant.
Well, and this just blew everything away. I mean, this is the one where you would go to the movie theater, the movie store, they would have, like the boxes of the videos sitting there, and the video would be checked out, and they'd just have the empty box there. And they'd have 20 of them. And if you were lucky, you could get one or two of them and get the film. That's the level of popularity it had when it was released on video. And the numbers do show that.
Yes, kids, you occasionally had to go to a store to pick up a physical copy of something called a VHS. And you had to have a player at your house that was capable of playing such a device.
Yes.
And if you were kind, you rewound it at the end.
Well, they would charge you extra if you didn't. So, but in this particular case, we would, if you went to the store and there was not enough there, you would sit and stand near the bin where they were doing the returns and hope that somebody brought one of them back so that you could quick say, hey, it's in the bin. I want that.
The good old days.
Yeah. Oh, well. Anyway, so I think for the public, it was a 5. For the industry, it had high critical review. Oh boy, I'm having a hard time. I guess I'm at a 4.5 for the industry, simply because Morgan Freeman got to be a leading man. This cemented him as a leading man. He could carry a film by himself. And he went on a run of just being a phenomenal star, movie star, contributor in Hollywood. He was the first actor to really transcend. I mean, the part was not written for a black man. It was written for a white Irish guy with red hair. And Morgan Freeman put on color blindness as far as certain roles, that you didn't have to be a white man or a black man. You could transcend it by just being a really good actor. And I think that started that concept. And so I'm going to go with a 4.5 for the industry for a 9.5 overall.
I mean, it's hard to ignore the ripple effects of what it did to certain people's careers within this. Clancy Brown has been feasting off of this film and his deep voice for 30 years. Morgan Freeman and Tim Robbins are probably still eating out on this movie. Morgan Freeman obviously is the voiceover king and the voice of God. You can say that between this and Bruce Almighty, he's basically locked that down until he dies. This movie is so popular that it has raised the stature of everybody that was involved in it. And by extension, I think it has some level of success, again, where we're talking about it basically raised the portfolio of one company by itself, that being Warner Brothers and TNT. At least for a time being when that was still a thing and cable television, even though I think it's starting to cycle back around now. It's just cable television is moving to Tubi and Pluto as opposed to, DirecTV or Spectrum or whatever the hell you have or had in the old days. But even so, this was kind of an afterthought in the original Academy Awards when it was held. It was kind of something that got a boost because it was included, but it was not necessarily significantly up for any of the awards. I think we have kind of, after the fact, because of how popular it is, said, well, how did this lose? Well, because Forrest Gump was on a huge trajectory and Pulp Fiction was the underdog darling. This had no chance of upsetting really any of those to win anything major in its time. And by extension, this movie was placed on TNT because it was easy to do so. We mentioned at the top that because it was a low-producing box office draw, they could get away with showing it on TV and showing premium ads without having to pay huge residuals. Now, they ended up having to do so in the end. Where at that point does that actually start? So because of that, I think this lives well with the audience. I'm not going to disagree on that part. But I have, again, a 4 and a 5. So I have a 9.
We started off with this saying, I'm the super fan and I'm here to spike the score of this thing. And I'm not looking at it as me here to do that. I look at it as you guys are putting out scores and I'll do my best to influence you based on my perspective and we'll see where we end up. But I don't see how you can look at this film and not see how it's become a cultural juggernaut. I mean, there are just so many movies that come and go. And even
it's within a window of 5 years. If we were talking again legacy, I think this has.
So when did the TNT thing hit? It hit within 5 years, and it changed the way people looked at movies on cable. And Dana brought up all the rentals and listen, this is arguably like the worst timing a movie has ever had in the history of film. Like it had a bad title and was put out the same week that Jurassic Park, Forrest Gump, and Pulp Fiction were all in the theaters. It up and vanished like a fart in the wind, if I can quote the film itself. But like the film itself, it managed to persevere despite its ill-timed and inconvenient fortune as it came out. And it is a bit of life imitating art, imitating it all. And Dana, you said a 9.5. Tom, you said a 9. The original score was what?
It's 7.83.
Which is well too low.
Which we agree with.
If I'm sitting here doing a solo podcast, I'm giving it a 10. But I think Dana's 9.5 is fine. I'm not gonna scream and yell about that. If we had to settle down to Tom's 9, okay. But it's like it's not The Godfather. Okay, how many movies are The Godfather in these instances?
But that's the thing. If you're grading it on a curve, and a lot of things should be either in the middle or the middle third or whatever, there are fewer 10s that you should be giving out. And I do think that there are gradations within this one. Like, if you're talking 10 for impact in its moment, that it changed the practices of Hollywood, like The Godfather's up there because it became the first one to really do wide release. And Jaws is up there because it literally created the summer blockbuster. And Star Wars is up there, and Gone with the Wind is up there. But now you're getting like a handful of 10 to maybe 20 movies. And I just don't think quite that this is on that level. Like 9 is really, really close. 9.5 is going to be excellent. It's going to be up there. But is it quite on the level of some of this, like the 20 or so that we'll say redefined film was like the number one at the box office in its moment? Somehow changed industry practices and basically made everybody a star overnight. I'm not sure it's quite on that level.
It did change industry practices. Up until this film hit the numbers that it did in video rental and such, the video sales were considered to be gravy. It was still the box office that mattered. This film changed perspectives. There were a lot of films that were greenlighted, knowing that it probably would not do well in movie theaters, but would do much better in home sales. Especially when you realize there was a shift in the market towards older Americans who did not go to the theaters as much anymore because of time commitments, family, whatever. And so they created a whole series of films and concepts that they knew were not going to sell at the box office, but they knew they could market on VHS and then ultimately DVD. And I think it changed. I think there were a lot of films that were greenlighted. I don't think, for example, you're going to have Titanic with that budget if they didn't think that they were going to make huge amounts of money also in the VHS market.
That's not the one to pull out. Like, if you're going to make an example, don't do it for the second highest grossing film at the time of all time. Like, we had T2 and Judgment Day, like, right before that. It's not James Cameron who was, like, needing to prove that he needed a big budget in order to maximize profits at the theater. No, it's more like Good Will Hunting was going to be, something that you're marketing more towards a home video rental space. Yeah, it may do well in theaters, but it's going to get a lot on the back end.
I think isn't that really what Miramax was banking on?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, Matt Damon's talked about the fact that the industry has significantly changed because they would make the $10 to $15 million movies specifically, like a lot of his late 90s career, The Rainmaker or The Talented Mr. Ripley. Those types of movies are not being made anymore because there isn't the back end that it used to be.
Just to echo Dana, I think it objectively changed industry standards. Not to mention, I realize we can't keep pulling out the same things for every category, but the fact that Morgan Freeman became kind of like the standard for voiceover, and he would be enlisted in all these commercials as voiceover because of the Shawshank Redemption. It was the first time he had ever done it. changing the way rentals were distributed, cable TV. I think it did change it. That being said, I agree with you, Tom, is it's tough. Impact significance, it ran third that year at the Oscars pretty clearly. So it's tough. A 10 for how it impacted things is when it was running third in at the time, and it bombed at the box office. I think there is enough cause to give it a blemish. I think a 9.5 is very fair. This to me is like kind of like textbook 9.5.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the settling point. I don't think we need to belabor it any further.
And just a word on Sight and Sound, because I think Sight and Sound is a great kind of indicator of what artists in the field view as art. But a movie like Shawshank Redemption it's not a sexy avant-garde. You're not going to wow anyone by putting it on your list. It's picking 10 movies that you're like, all right, these 10 movies are movies you should check out. Movies like Shawshank Redemption are going to get hit and hurt on this because everybody's seen them. No one put Titanic on the Sight and Sound because everybody's seen it. It's not, there's no sexy thing. Doesn't mean it's not one of the greatest films. That's I don't want it to sound like I'm a Sight and Sound hater, because I'm not. I think it fulfills a very, very necessary venue for conversation, but it isn't a list of the greatest films in order. It's just the films that are most mentioned by filmmakers.
Yeah, it's first off, I take umbrance with greatest movie of all time list because there's no objective criteria. It's only on a limited scale of sub-critics and directors to a degree. So there's very fine lines as to how it's done. They're only voting for 10 films, and then it's an aggregate score of like how often it appeared on something. That's not a measure of anything. If you're doing part of the reason why we did the math, the rubric portions of this particular program, and I know we've done this before, so you can skip ahead probably a good 3 minutes while I monologue here.
How dare you? No, you can't. Listen to the man.
Even if they did like each an individual list of 50, what do you think are the 50 best movies? And I think that's a more accurate barometer of what that list is actually trying to achieve. Is the best movie, because they're trying to ask people, what do you think is the greatest? And in that portion, it's probably like based on acting, directing, story, screenplay, all of these other elements. What is the best movie, essentially? And then they're like, okay, these are the 10 that I think are the best thing that I've ever seen. Some of them, it might do a favorites list. These are my 10 favorite films. I've seen that occasionally done. But how does that measure actual greatness? And so that's been part of the ingenuity behind our show, has been always for that. Now, we do overweight a little bit more on audience participation, which is why we have some probably films that are more, I would say, audience favorites near the top, hence your criticism of The Dark Knight currently being our number one. But Jaws is up there. 12 Angry Men is up there. I mean, it's hard to argue with a lot of the ones we have in the top 10.
I think one of my selections, and still alive in the sub 50 tournament, The Water Boy, being alongside Unforgiven. I think that was more what I criticized, because that's a little tough. But no, I mean, I think me teasing you about The Dark Knight is just more, it's your favorite movie's number one. But I think a lot of people would agree with you. It's got to be up there on the IMDb list there.
I mean, somewhere between the Sight and Sound poll and the IMDb top 250 is what the actual list of the greatest movies of all time should be.
Let's just remind ourselves that Shawshank is on all of them there. So, well, I guess it's not on Sight and Sound because it's not cool enough to the current.
Yeah, it's not art house enough like Jean Dielman.
Haven't seen it, so no comment. I can't comment on a movie I haven't seen.
There is nothing like watching Jean Dielman in February on the weekend of the Super Bowl, straight through, no breaks, no phones, while you have COVID. That was an experience, right, Dad?
Yeah, it's kind of reminiscent of watching paint dry, but having your hands taped to your side and having an itch on your nose.
You're out there doing God's work, gentlemen. I appreciate you for it.
All right. Let's move to Novelty then. This is kind of a measure. I've recently taken it to mean more of both the originality of the idea or possibly, multiple things about the originality of what it's trying to achieve, as well as the execution of the movie overall. Originally on this one, we had a 7.33 average, although this was before we were incorporating those two factors or elements to our test, if you will. Dad, did we get this one right or wrong?
Pretty close. There was one thing that I would note that I'd never thought about before. I saw a critic who said this is the one film where it's a friendship film where it's not based upon a crime or a heist or a woman or some act or some road trip, which makes it unique. So to that extent, the novelty is different than other things. I mean, the fact that it was the 17th or 16th best prison film, and commenting. I mean, there's obviously a lot of prison films. So to that,
could be its own channel on Tubi.
Yeah, prison films on Tubi. Execution, it nailed it. I mean, it's every once in a while you have the perfect storm, and this created the perfect storm. Relatively inexperienced director.
Inexperienced? I think this is his first film.
It is his first film, yes.
Yeah, and I think he'd done a few smaller projects or something before, type of thing. But yeah, it's the perfect storm. So yeah, they nailed it. But I think Novelty probably is pretty close to where it should be. I actually had a 5 points or 7.5, excuse me.
I will agree with you, although I score higher on the originality of the idea from the concept that I think this is a unicorn even among its genre. I think it creates to itself somewhat of a subgenre where we actually treat the prisoners as somewhat human for the first time. We are a little bit ahead on, police brutality and a little bit of the corruption that's associated with the police, in this case, the guards. So we take kind of an unusual task on that we have this human side to prison life in a way that we didn't normally before. And as a matter of cause, it's still somewhat of a period piece. So I can't give it full 5 points. It does feel familiar as part of that, but I had it at a 4. And then as far as the execution, I agree. That's a full 5 for me. Deakins is fantastic. The screenplay is outstanding. The music hits all the right notes. For an inexperienced director, this is framed fantastically, and I think that has a lot more to do with Deakins, but even so, he knew what tone and tenor to set with the film. It is why I think it's so appealing generally with the audience. We have great acting performances throughout. The casting is fantastic on this one. So I have no criticisms on the execution. I have a 9.
So there's a particular avenue I'm going to focus on with this one. In addition to this being my favorite movie of all time, I'm a huge Stephen King fan. I've read, I haven't read all of his work, but I've read a good portion of it. And I have read Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption. And Stephen King himself called his short story unadaptable. He said he had never imagined that anyone would even ask to adapt it, let alone actually execute it. This is one of the greatest adaptations of all time. When a presence, an icon like Stephen King calls his own work a non-adaptable, wouldn't even think someone would try to make a movie out of this, and we get one of the most beloved films of all time in The Shawshank Redemption, that is extremely novel to me. I think that, you mentioned before, Tom, in your prelude about it being voted the best film to not win an Oscar that was up for Oscars, or whatever the exact wording was of that. It is a crime that it did not win for adapted screenplay. I mean, this should have won for adapted screenplay. Forrest Gump did not need to win that award. I also think it should have won for cinematography too. Legends of the Fall is a movie that exactly nobody watches ever. Has anyone put that movie on in 2024? I don't think so. But I think the fact that you took an entity that Stephen King didn't expect anybody to even call him on, he didn't expect to pick up the phone and ask, even for $1, can I adapt Shawshank Redemption? I think that's extremely novel. So I think a 9 is I'll echo Tom's 9 there with that, because it is a prison movie and there is some tropes and such in there. So where you guys want to go with that, I think a 9 is very fair.
All right, so we have 2 9s and a 7.5. Dad, you're kind of the odd man out on this, so how far are you willing to come up?
I'll leave this debate between the two, the current lawyer and the prospective lawyer. I'll step out on this one.
Yeah.
8.75?
I was going to say 8.6, but I'll settle at 8.75.
Yeah, of course you would. All right, fine.
Dana doesn't seem too disappointed.
I don't think it makes one hill of beans to him, where this actually comes out. He's not gonna bang the table at all for it, but all right. So that's an 8.
I'm thinking Dana's hyped on this movie right now. I'm like, this was a good viewing for you this time around, Dana.
Well, I don't think he's opposed to the movie. That's why I'm saying I don't think he's gonna be upset at a higher scoring potentially.
Yeah, his scores are up from last time though. I like seeing that. I like it.
So that looks like a good spot for our second break. We will be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, as of this last month, all of our episodes are also now in video format. That's right, you can see my resting nerd face and all of Dana's famous okays in pristine high definition. So far, we have 12 different episodes now available to watch. Just head to youtube.com/@gmotepodcast, where I have the full video and audio feeds on our website, ronnieduncanstudios.com/gmotepodcast. Both of those are available in the episode description of this episode, so check us out there, and if you do, please like the video or subscribe to us. We would really appreciate it. Dad, do we have anyone to remember this week?
Yes. Scott Simon, 75, American musician, member of Sha Na Na, wrote Sandy for Grease. Eric Gilliland, 62, American TV producer and writer. Roseanne, The Connors, That 70s Show, The Wonder Years, won a Daytime Emmy in 2019. James Darren, 88, American actor, was in the Gidget movies, The Time Tunnel, TV show T.J. Hooker, and in the film The Guns of Navarone. Will Jennings, 80, American Hall of Fame lyrist. My Heart Will Go On, Tears in Heaven, Up Where We Belong, Oscar winner 1983 and 1998, Grammy winner 1993, 1999. And this is with heavy heart specifically. James Earl Jones, 93, American actor. Star Wars, Fences, The Lion King. Tony winner 1969 and 1987.
So he is an EGOT winner and the first person to win 2 Emmys in the same calendar year. But more than anything, he defines a subsection of my childhood. The Sandlot, The Lion King, which was the first film I remember seeing in theaters, Star Wars as Darth Vader, Field of Dreams. I mean, it's hard to get over the impact he had from about roughly 1987 through about 1998.
Yeah, I mean, I'd go back to the Sandlot. Just, the reveal of him at the end just being like a nice old man where they thought he was this monster. And, George, I knew George. Yeah, I mean, he passed today. Sad. It's tough losing these legends. I know you guys do this segment every week, and you cover some of the most notable to some of the least notable. I mean, I think in the original episode for Shawshank, you guys covered Norm Macdonald passing, who is since his death has become this comedic icon. He's like the Herman Melville of comedy. It is great that you guys do this, and it's probably a little extra dicey when someone passes hours before we record like he did. But I love this section that you do. I did want to, if you guys don't mind, just want to say a word on Will Jennings.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't want him to get over shit. He wrote two of like the more storied songs of my life, or the 90s, or however you want to put it, in My Heart Will Go On and Tears in Heaven. Just quickly on Tears in Heaven, obviously Eric Clapton song, brilliant, one of the saddest songs you'll ever hear. I mean, his son passed tragically at the age 3 in a horrible, fell out of a window. It's a horrible thing. And Clapton basically went into seclusion for a while and stepped away from everything, and came back and wrote this song, but wrote the first verse of the song and said, this is all I can do. I can set the table, but I need someone else to do this. And he called in Will Jennings because he liked the work that he had done prior to this, and he called him in. And Will Jennings like, this is kind of an awkward spot you're asking me to come into. Are you sure? I think you should finish the song. No, I need you to do this. And I mean, you can't hear that song and not cry today. I mean, I just read the lyrics today because I was like, oh, he wrote the first verse, and I'm just writing it. And I get like halfway down the song and I'm shedding tears. So, and then of course, My Heart Will Go On, which is probably one of the most famous songs from a film. And James Cameron pressured into putting a pop song into his movie. He didn't want to do it. He had written the kind of the musical tone of My Heart Will Go On, and Jennings hopped in, wrote the song, got Celine Dion in the mix. In one take, she records the song. And that's what we know today. It's only seen Celine Dion. Grab a microphone. Celine Dion, maybe Michael Jackson could do that. But probably one of the greatest one-take performances in the history of pop music. Maybe that and Billie Jean. Yeah, so just I saw his name up today, and I just went down a rabbit hole on Wikipedia looking up all these people and all this stuff. So just wanted to shout at him. He clearly and surely was going to get overshadowed by Darth Vader here today, so I wanted to give him a little love. But yeah, all the people mentioned today, James Earl Jones and all, it's sad to lose these legends.
With James Earl Jones, I would say that I actually had the privilege of seeing him in a stage play in New York on Broadway.
Wow.
2005 or 2006, and he came out. The play was it had Cynthia Nixon. It had...
Oh, wow.
It had John Larroquette. It had... Why am I drawing a blank? Uncle Jesse from...
John Stamos.
John Stamos. It had Sybil Shepherd in it.
Talk about eclectic.
Yeah. It was a reproduced play written by Gore Vidal, and Gore Vidal had died the day before.
Oh, jeez.
And so, and I got to see James Earl Jones. He was kind of, because of his health and some things, he was a little bit of a germaphobe, so he wouldn't do the typical stage line where people could come up and talk to you and do the autographs. He put a chair out in the middle of the alley, and they put a rope around in a circle, and he sat on this chair and he just started, where are you from? Oh, I remember being there and doing a play. And, and it just went through this Q&A session for about 15, 20 minutes. Just a really pleasant man. And I'll just always remember that.
And he liked Star Wars too.
Yes, he did.
And so, of course, we remember all of these fondly for their contributions with a moment of silence in their honor. Thank you. Okay, let's get back to our rubric scoring. We left off at Classicness. Now, this is the most amorphous category that we have. We normally, as us two regular scorers, and we hope to impart that somewhat on our guests, but start at roughly a 7, and then either we work our way up or down. Usually we have more room to move on films going down, just with how poorly things either age from a special effects or, the culture of the time not being reflective on where we're at with our own sensibilities in the modern era. We have very few things that we move it up for. Timelessness and being ahead of its time on certain social issues or topics that we would deem are more inclusive of what we would expect today if a film was made are two of the few examples where we would. Musicals that still like hold attention or comedies that are still funny are two other examples where we've moved films up or down. But Dad, originally on this film, we had a 9.33. Did we get this right or wrong?
I say we got it right. I say that on 2 points. One, the issues of homosexuality are a little bit more pointed now, I think, than they were at the time the film was released. But by the same token, it was way ahead of its time in discussing corruption and police brutality. And so they weigh out against each other, even from 2021. So I would say the 9 is perfect.
So I also have a 9. So slightly below what we originally had on this one. Part of the reason that I have it at that, I didn't really have any points to take off of. I agree with you that it had a point up for me as a factor for the police brutality, the corruption involved, government officials, things that we hadn't necessarily considered at the time that I do think are a little bit more modern voiced, particularly when we're talking about criminal justice reform, which isn't a new topic, but it is something that I think has become much more widely accepted as something we're striving towards in the last decade or so, or at least, on a majority front, whereas it used to be much more of a minority of the culture. And I would say that this meets the criteria. It's like starting to leak into the timelessness factor for me. So I had 2 points up. I had no points down. I have it at a 9.
I asked this type of question on our 12 Angry Men episode about, or maybe it was actually I think it was our Best Years of Our Lives episode. I think it was during the Novelty character. He's like, if this isn't a 10, what is? So I think like when you're scaling 1 to 10, you have to establish that top shelf of what is the 10. And I hate to put you on the spot again, Tom. I should have prepped you for this, but like, what has gotten a 10 in this category?
So I could look that up quick, but if
Casablanca must have gotten a 10.
I don't think it on the last, because we've revisited it twice. I think at one time it had, but I want to say that the most classic example of a full classicness score is usually Wizard of Oz.
Right. So the 1,000% should be a 10. There are films of films, like the ones that you can be from any decade, you can be from any time and watch it and still experience the magic of the movies. And to me, The Shawshank Redemption is that. I have watched this recently with 2 dates who never saw the movie, just flat out was like, okay, yeah, I don't know anything about this, and just watched it. A date from the past and my current girlfriend now. But to watch someone get sucked into the magic of cinema is just a wonderful thing. It's like watching it for the first time yourself. And there are some films that are like that. And I know you guys didn't have, you recently covered The Sixth Sense, a wonderful episode. You should go back and listen to it, listeners. And neither of you really had the true experience of not knowing what was going on and then getting hit with it. To me, that's another classic 10. I think that The Shawshank Redemption, as a film that's later on, it's in the 90s, but I think it stands with the early classics. I think it is a modern classic. So I endorse a 10. I don't think I'm going to be budging you guys on it with this, so maybe I try to coach up that 9.33 that you guys had, but I just, maybe the knock on it is the lack of women in the movie, but it's like it's a prison movie from the the 40s. It's a period piece in the 40s where you can't just ham fist women guards into The Shawshank Redemption. I mean, there's tell your man to double bag. Last time he didn't double bag. We get the random Karen at the grocery store. But I don't know, man. To me, it's like this is a classic film.
The only knock I would have, if it's anything, is it just hasn't. It's not old enough quite yet. That's the only issue that really it has, because I have like a timelessness scale, and when we're talking like Casablanca, it's probably going to get 3 points just from how old it is and how much it still holds up and still is like a very engaging movie. The Best Years of Our Lives is in somewhat of that same category. Now, I haven't updated this list in a while. I really should go back through and like add all the stuff from this season, but it's been a whirlwind of like the summer has flown by. But
you're allowed to live life, Tom. You're allowed to live life. It's
well, living life is not going to law school. That's living in a dungeon for 3 years.
It's part of life.
Very little like light that comes into the room. But anyway,
it's the hole.
It's your purgatory.
Give him another month.
Career.
Yeah, well, and the reward at the end of it is a great legal career. Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway. Casablanca
I don't see that you've really been hurting through childhood.
That aside, the only film that has achieved a full 10 in classicness to this point that's on this list, and I think there are some that have achieved it since, is both revisits of Casablanca. The next highest one on the list was a 9.75 for High Noon.
So you have not given out many 10s?
No. Not in this category, no.
Oh, okay. All right, that makes me feel a little better.
So among the 9.5s, and that would be kind of in this range. So Shawshank is at a 9.33, along with like The Big Lebowski, 12 Years a Slave, Wall-E, Fargo, All the President's Men is kind of in that range.
Just want to hop in. The Big Lebowski has Tara Reid in it, which instantly hurts its classicness. So let's just throw that out there.
Okay.
Well, I don't know. Anyway. She seems rather class. Well, no, that would be classless. Okay, all right, never mind. My
but
bad.
Anyway, so 9.5 has Psycho, Network, 12 Angry Men, Before We Did the Revisit, Wizard of Oz, Mary Poppins, Double Indemnity, and Jaws.
They're all older films, so this would be the newest film on this list. But I
So realistically,
this is an interesting combo.
If we were to average this, it would come to the exact same score we had originally.
Then I think you got to keep it.
All right, so we'll settle at a 9.33.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right, now the category where we're not going to really need to negotiate because it's so subjective that I really don't like to argue with people over their rewatchability score. But originally on this one, we had a 9.58. Dad, were we right or wrong?
Right. I have a 9.5. This is a film that, 9 out of 10 times I'm going to put on and just leave on. I'm going to watch it. If it's on, I'll stop and watch it for a while. It's just 1 out of 10 times I'm having a really shitty day and, where I'm really not happy being a practicing attorney and because something goes wrong.
You mean that when you've had a hard day, you don't want to watch Andy get gang raped?
I'd like to tell you he fought the good fight.
Yeah. Anyway, no. And so that's why it can't be a 10 for me. I'll go with my 9.5.
Okay, superfan. I'll let you.
Okay.
Give it your 10 and
sure, but it is the Kieran B test. I'll plug it this time. It was inspired by your episode on this. And it's funny. I listened back today. I'm like, oh, I took such umbrage over like a 9.7 or what? I'm like, damn. But it was just, I think, Tom, it was you who said, you're just like, well, I'm just not going to watch a prison movie or whatever it was. And fine. But to me, it's not just about like rewatchability is not just about like, am I going to put it on? It's if this movie comes across my life, what's the likelihood that it's going to derail my day? And there's no movie that derails your day more than Shawshank Redemption. I mean, if you walk through a room, and this has happened to me, where the two of them are sitting at the wall talking about the path of the tornado, and there's a rock that has no earthly business being on that wall. You're not leaving. You're just not leaving the room. You are sitting down. It could be your wedding day. You're finishing that film. I just think this is the ultimate 10. It's just the ultimate 10 for me. I watch it yearly. I would never turn it off if we're on. This is where the fanboy biasness comes through. But yes, listen, the first hour, I mean, watching fat ass get beaten to death is, I mean, it's brutal. I mean, that's a tough sell. Like when you sit down and you like recommend the movie to someone and they sit down and watch that, you're like, oh yeah, oh, we got to get through this part. And then, yeah, there's going to be some rape in the, listen, it's a heavy material. There's a lot going on. But to me, it's just 10. It's a 10.
All right, you ready for me to ruin your day?
Oh, no. He went down.
So, applying your test, it's going to be lower.
Okay.
So, I came up with my own what is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for each side of your test. So, putting it on, the fact that I hadn't put it on in several years, not that it's like anything that I wouldn't put on, it's just not something that I'm like thinking, oh, well, I haven't watched that in a while. It's just not that movie for me. So I would put it somewhere between every few years or maybe once a year type of thing. So that's about a 3.5 for me. Already kind of moving down the scale a little bit. Leaving it on, am I stopping my entire day and watching it then and there? It's not that kind of film for me. I will stop and watch a few scenes. I will watch likely a few minutes. I may even, like plan to watch it later or come back to it after a while and finish it. But I'm not stopping my entire day to watch it exactly right then and there. It wouldn't even have to be my wedding day. It's just, unless I have a purpose to put the film on, it's just not quite that film for me. So I would have that hovering at about 3.5 or a 4. I'll probably defer more to the 3.5. So I actually have a 7. You okay?
No, I mean, I am, but I think we need to just let the jury recognize that you are forced to watch a movie a week already. So like, if it's not like you have like a summer off from film, and you're not just going to casually throw on any 2 hour and 20-minute movie. Just throwing that out there.
That's very true.
Also, like, and and this is the subjectivity category, and we don't want to keep bringing up the same things every category, but like, I think TNT has proven that this movie's rewatchable. I mean, it is objectively rewatchable. So I'm not saying that you should go up from what you had, but bringing it down, like, let's defer to the people a little bit here. And those heathens, I saw that the audience score went down. I know we're even getting up to that yet, but those heathens have brought the score down. I don't appreciate that. But yeah, so I don't know. Are you bringing it down from what it is? Were you fighting to bring it down? Is that what you're doing right now, Tom?
No, I was being honest with exactly where I would have it at rewatchability.
Okay.
It's just you introduced the test. If we were doing it based on the old scoring, that's a little less subjective.
I love you using it, my own system against me. It's actually brilliant. I appreciate it quite a bit.
So the average on this one will turn out to be an 8.83.
So you're keeping the original score.
No, it moved down, I think 0.75 points, almost exactly. Yeah, that looks right. 9.58 to 8.83. Yeah, that looks right. So, all right.
You're not negotiating.
That is correct.
Wow, okay.
This one, because it's too subjective.
Yeah, right. There's no negotiating on the rewatchability yet.
So with audience score, as you kind of alluded to already, but we were originally at a 9.7, 96% for Google users, 98% for Rotten Tomato users. Now, the Rotten Tomato users stayed the same, but the Google users dropped a percentage point. So they're down to 95. So this drops another 0.05 to 9.65. Now, originally, our score on this one was a 52.77 and was good enough for number 15 on our list. What do you think will be the new score?
Oh, geez.
56.5.
Which is up Up or down how much?
So 56.5 would put it 0.02 ahead of The Dark Knight for number 1.
Ooh.
I think it'll be lower than that based on the rewatchability score.
So to repeat the categories, we moved from a 9 to a 9.75 in legacy, from a 7.83 to a 9.5 in impact and significance, from a 7.33 to an 8.75 for novelty. We stayed the same on classicness at 9.33, and we moved slightly down for rewatchability at 9.58 to 8.83, and audience score from 9.7 to 9.65. I will also add, even though it has not aired yet, that Pulp Fiction from last week got 54.73 points to move up into the top 10. So where do you think this one ends up?
I think it's in the top 10. I think it's somewhere in the 5 to 7 range. That's what I'll guess.
Our final total is 55.81, and that would currently place it just between Jaws and North by Northwest for number 3.
Wow. I feel good about that. Jaws is ahead of it, right?
Jaws is just slightly ahead of it at 56.15, and The Dark Knight is still number 1.
Wow. And North by Northwest is my favorite Hitchcock movie, so I love that being up there, too.
Well, we share that in common.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. All right, I'm glad to be a part of this. And I think not negotiating on rewatchability was the right move there.
So if you disagree with any of our scoring or have any problems with any of the things that we did, including my rewatchability score, as I think that will probably draw the most ire, I would suggest writing us at greatestaltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com, or you can find us on any of our socials at Gmote Podcast on Instagram, Twitter, X. Well, I guess X and Twitter are the same thing. Instagram, TikTok, and all of the other things. Letterboxd, YouTube, etc. Or you can find us at RonnieDuncanStudios.com/Gmote Podcast. All right, let's go to our remaining questions on this one. I can't believe we didn't ask several of these questions on the original episode, but how does Andy get the poster back up?
You're going to hate my answer. It's just this with this movie, it's just there's allegory all over the place, so I don't think it matters. You know, it's a bit of this is all representing a theme or a meaning, but how I've heard this explained, it's that he has it stapled from the top and he crawls under it and it settles in from the bottom, and you can throw a rock hard enough because the warden does kind of really give it some oomph, where even if it's not attached at the bottom, it will rip. That's how I've heard it explained. I don't necessarily know that I buy it, but that's how I've heard it explained, and I'm okay with it.
There's a scene where he's lifting it up, and he's got it just pinned at the top, and he's digging into it. That's how he was doing it.
No, there's no scene. You're imagining things. There is no such scene.
Yeah, there is.
Okay, prove me wrong, but there is no such scene.
All right, I will.
That might be a deleted scene.
I saw it when I was watching it last night.
It doesn't exist. The only scene where he's actually hammering into the wall is when he's carving his name in and he takes the chunk out. That's the only scene where you see him carving at all.
Nope. There is another scene.
Okay.
I'll find it. I will email you tomorrow or text you with the spotted where it is in the film.
Okay, that's fine. You do that. How did Andy have access to the weather reports?
Warden had newspapers all over the office. He would have had easily access to it at some point in time.
Library's really, really up and coming up there in Maine, so I'm sure they had maybe daily newspapers. If anyone's going to see it there, it's going to be Andy, maybe. But
so add meteorology to his tax exploits as his prowesses grow.
I don't think thunder hits that quickly in any storm anyway. So, that was... I've always had a problem with that.
I still have issues with, okay, you made one small hole in the pipe. You have enough to stick your head in. How did you get the rest of your body in there?
1,000%. Totally agree. It's always bothered me. Can I say one that's also always bothered me? Here, This is super nitpicky, but I've never understood the currency in this movie with the cigarettes and all that stuff, but that's its own thing. But so they go through this whole ordeal where they're betting the cigarettes on the who's going to break first and all that, and line them up in a pretty little row, and then so it seems like a pack of cigarettes is pretty, like, that's a good amount of currency within this world.
Oh yeah.
Does Brooks Hadlin get a pack of cigarettes every single item that he delivers? Like, because when he delivers Andy the book and the rock hammer, Red puts a pack of cigarettes in his top pocket. Like, every deal he makes is a pack of cigarettes. So Brooks Hadlin's just like living in a mountain of cigarette packs at that point. That always.
Well, and we never see him smoke either.
Yeah, I just the market imbalance there is a little crazy for me. So
yeah, I don't know. Does Andy crawl through the sewer in his bare feet?
I do believe so.
Would have had to.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't see it, but like you would think he would protect the shoes. It had to be in his bag.
Mm-hmm.
And he leaves his old shoes behind.
Yeah, there's no way he didn't smell like shit walking into that bank too. Jeez.
Yeah. Yeah, some puddle with some rainwater is not going to do it.
I don't let any of this get in the way of my experience just because I love the...
He had a bar of soap.
It's a fable. It's an allegory.
He had a bar of soap.
To be fair, even if he did have a bar of soap, it is rural Maine in the 1950s. The possibility that anybody walking into the bank on any given moment is going to smell like manure is probably high.
Well, it was 1966.
Whatever. It's
But
still not really making that much of an adjustment that there are a lot of farmers around.
Nerdy nitpick for me, too, is just Shawshank Prison in the Stephen King universe is in Bangor, Maine. They say he walks into a Portland bank. Portland and Bangor that's like a 3-hour drive. So I'm sure they schmozzed the geography for the movie, and that's fine. But just
I mean, how many people are there from Maine that we know that can fact check that? How did no one hear Andy digging for 19 years?
I don't. Does the scraping? We're talking about 20 years of scraping. Does that make a noise? Is it? I don't know. That's. It's a valid question. I don't know.
How did it switch from day to night when Tommy's killed? So this is like a super nitpicky thing, but when we're walking in the hallway, you can see the light, like the sunlight. It's clear, like middle of the day. And all of a sudden you walk outside and the warden's waiting and it's dusk.
Is it sunlight or is it floodlight?
Why would it be floodlight through the open window? I mean, look at the scene preceding it. It looks like sunlight. It doesn't quite add up, but all right.
You are nitpicking, but that's okay.
Yes, that is correct.
That's one of the things we appreciate about you.
Where does Warden Norton rank on the all-time best villains list?
I personally think he should have been up for an Oscar in this role. I thought it should have been 2 lead nominations for
Robbins and Freeman.
Yeah, Robbins and Freeman. And I thought he should have been in the mix there. It's iconic for me. And you talked about in your intro, Tom, about people who they made so much money that they probably didn't have to. I mean, he totally made so much money he didn't have to work. That's why we didn't see him in a bunch of movies. He basically was rich off of this thing because he was the third build. He's amazing in this, and it's Wicked Witch of the West quality here. Yeah, he's the top villain.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to put him in like the top tier. He's not Darth Vader. He's not the Joker. He's not Anton Chigurh. He's not Hans Landa. He's not like quite that level. But due to the popularity of the film, I don't think anybody's going to have any question if he's in that like B villains tier or category where, he's like in the next 20.
I'd say he's like alongside Gene Hackman in Unforgiven. That's that tier.
Yeah. Along with J.K. Simmons' character, I guess, if people classify that as a villain.
I'd have Simmons a little higher. I'd have Simmons with Landa and with the Joker, and
Yeah, that
I'd have him-
performance.
I don't really consider that a villain, but I mean, if you do, it's probably up there. The shark from Jaws.
I'm sure some people don't consider the Joker a villain. So.
Well, that's true, especially if you watch Joker, which unfortunately I have to in a couple of weeks again.
Yeah.
There's a Gmote on the Joker coming up.
Yeah.
That was I saw in the theaters once and didn't revisit it. No comment. I mean, I enjoyed it at the time. I don't know that I'd enjoy it again. Who knows? To me, it was just a rip-off of Taxi Driver. But
exactly. Yeah. So, any other remaining questions for either of you?
No, I think we covered it.
No.
All right. Well, I consider that a successful episode. So, I want to thank our guest, Kieran B., for being back for his 9th episode. But remind everybody where you are and where they can find you.
Yes. Best Picture Cast is where you want to check us out. We're at Best Picture Cast pretty much on all of the social media platforms. You can follow me on Letterboxd at Kieran B. BPC. Find out what my 4 favorites are, and this is one of them. And there are 2 other Gmote episodes that are on there. I just referenced Unforgiven. That's one of my 4 favorites. Also, The Terminator, which got disgraced on this show, and we'll, for another day, we'll discuss that. Yeah, Lawrence of Arabia too, which I know you haven't tackled that monster yet here at Gmote, but I love that film. So those are my 4 favorites there. Follow me on Letterboxd, Kieran B. BPC, but Best Picture Cast everywhere else. And we have a good time over there. Listen up, and I hope you join the crew and follow along, because we have fun over there.
And I am one of your 16 followers on Letterboxd.
Yes, I just launched it, and I'm going to be doing October. I'm going to be reviewing. I don't love the whole star system. I don't love doing that for movies because my stars change as I watch movies again and rewatch. But I decided that horror movies I can justify starring. So I'm going to be rating horror movies as I go, because that is a very kind of specific niche. So yeah, so you can look forward to that there.
I will agree. My stars change, but I'm willing to update them as I go. I had this listed as a 4.5, and I thought, yeah, we probably should just leave it at that. And then I took a second thought at it, and I'm like, I mean, if this isn't a 5, what the fuck is?
Good for you.
It's a 5 now.
Hell yes.
On my own personal Letterboxd. And updated, it will be one of the few in the Gmote Letterboxd that will now be a 5-star. I think it's only 5 films that are a 5-star. So we'll have an honorary badge, I guess, next to it. So, but Dad, any remaining thoughts for the week?
We lost James Earl Jones today. And the other thing I saw was Kathy Bates announced that she's retiring from acting. So she just finished a Hulu TV project where she it was an update of the 90s, early or 80s, 90s Ben Matlock. She's Maddie Matlock. And she said it was just too much at her age, and so she's fought her whole life to get where she is, and she's enjoyed the ride, but it's time to step aside. So as I'm starting to age and I'm seeing all of the actors and actresses that significant in my movie watching and television life either retiring or passing away, just reminds me of how old I'm getting. And I guess the great thing would be is if you're still standing and you're kind of alone in that process, then you've achieved something, I guess. But otherwise, just kind of saddened me. I mean, she is 76, and I understand where that's coming from because it becomes more and more difficult to remember your lines as you get older. So it ultimately ended Jack Nicholson's career because he didn't want to have to wear an earpiece and have people feeding him his lines. So, yeah. So, on that note.
Well, that does bring it full circle between Stephen King and The Waterboy, so.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Won her Oscar for Misery, and should have been up for an Oscar for Waterboy, right, Tom?
Yes.
You and your foosball.
She is like truly great in that movie, though.
And we got our Clint Eastwood tie-ins there too with Richard Jewell, her final nomination.
But congratulations to her on her retirement. I'm sure she will enjoy it well. Unfortunately, we don't get the benefit of any more of her performances, but we do have the hindsight available to us on all the streaming platforms for all of her previous work and all of the previous work of many of these artists who have either left us or since retired. But I really don't have anything additionally for the week, so that'll do it for us. Thank you for listening. As a lawyer, I've had to learn that people aren't just good or bad. People are many things. Next week, for our 229th episode, we welcome back Christine Duncan, our most frequent guest, and new guest Mike Emol of Cinemus to discuss the classic legal drama Anatomy of a Murder from 1959. Directed by Otto Preminger, written by Wendell Mays. Music by Duke Ellington, starring James Stewart, Lee Remick, Ben Gazzara, and George C. Scott. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Please like, follow, rate, and review, or whatever on whichever platform you have so that more can join in our fun. You can also email the show at the new RonnieDuncanStudios.com or at greatestalltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com, or find us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, or TikTok at the handle @GModePodcast. The Greatest Movie of All Time is a production of Ronnie Duncan Studios. Our show is mixed, edited, and written by Thomas Duncan. Our music is thanks to Purple Planet Music. Our technical provider and distributor is Captivate FM.